listening to the sounds of Victorian lifestyle in the 1850s and 60s with your host, Noah Stepbro. I'm messing around with my, I got a little mixer board so I can mix my audio in a little bit better here. We're going to try to record some history videos here. Okay. For those of you in the class here, we've been trucking along and learning how to use kind of the tools of the craft. We're using these two, OneNote and Satori. And so I'm going to be on Satori, like we're going to be for all of our material. So I'm going to leave the link in the YouTube description for the video if people are watching it online. But for those of you that are just in History 108, it's also in your syllabus and in OneNote as well. So it's all connected. Here we go. I'm going to head over to, hey, Satori. I'm up in the corner. So you guys can see here on Satori that if you've been on here, I've cleaned it up a little bit. I've kind of gone back and written some extra stuff to talk about, unpack some of the items that weren't as clear before. Because, like I said, this was a project I opened up to students over the last few semesters. So I just had a lot more cleaning up to do than I realized. Especially the last semester when everybody was on quarantine, I think everybody was really bored. So no joke. And one of my classes was an honors class. Students went nuts. They posted so much stuff in there, which is great. I'm so happy that they were interacting so much with it. There's a lot of fun stuff in there, but it took me a while to get through and kind of clean up so I could refocus on my, get you guys focused on the main points of these boards that I'm presenting you with a ton of information, right? So just all kinds of stuff from pop culture to politics to religion and economics. It's like, well, this is a lot of stuff. And kind of like in life, I feel that we can really easily be overwhelmed by just how many things that are going on in life, right? Not just history. Like when we're looking at history, we're looking at somebody else's life at some other time that's equally as complicated with tons of stuff going on. You don't really know what to pay attention to and what not to, right? Like we don't really know what is going to become a big deal always. Sometimes we know immediately, right? Like everybody knew as soon as the 9/11 terrorist attacks happened, like, oh, that's a game changer. Like that's definitely going to be a big deal. But other things, they're kind of like really, we can make a big deal out of them at the time. And then it's like, oh yeah, whatever happened to Pogs? Yeah, I forgot about those. Like, they didn't turn out so big. Or then some weird things happen like hula hoops, which are even bigger than, if you know what Pogs are from the 90s. Hula hoops in the 50s, they sold millions of them in America. Crazy. Everybody buying plastic circles to swing around their hips. Interesting. So, well, how do we navigate just kind of the material ahead? And it's set up to be like this because this is how it is in life, right? With just all the material you're accessing, whether it's academic or not. You got to kind of know what is really important and how to pull certain things out of the text that or out of the context of what you're looking at that might not be apparent when you're first starting out. So I've tried to make that a little bit easier by kind of like what you'd expect in a lot of textbooks, bolding, highlighting, underlining certain phrases that are like a big deal. So here I'm explaining that a few of the huge overarching themes of this course, 150 years, of modern American history. One's colonization. which is, yeah, a big European thing, but America is kind of like one at the game of colonization. The colony has become the colonizer. But this is something, this is obviously incredibly important around the world. This process affected all humans, and it created globalization. So you can't just even write it off outright. It's like, well, this is just what happened. This is really complicated. So in order to understand something like that, we can't sit in the bubble of America to talk about American history. We have to go outside and look at all the things that are happening around the world, and maybe where we're at around the world too, that things are happening that make some of these stories that we know, or parts of history that we know that are disconnected, all of a sudden, oh, okay, that's easier to understand. Why the hell would Japan just go and bomb Hawaii? Right? Like that. I mean, that was a mystery to me, for years. And then it's like, oh, okay, now I'm understanding that, like, oh, there was this big whole global economy going on over there, and Japan was like kind of acting like a colonial power over there, and they were stepping on France and Britain and America's toes, and then they were doing some stuff that we didn't like as well, and so we stopped selling oil to them, which, if you can believe it, America was an exporting oil country before World War II, and that was that hurt their economy and their war efforts, and so they bombed what was not a state, but like little, it's a military base out in the middle of the Pacific. They thought it would go one way, and it went the other way, right? Like we responded with not the thing that they were looking for. So this stuff, if we don't know those things, though, it's like, I don't know, why would Japan attack us? That's crazy. Like, they just must be horrible people. No, there's like just cause and effect reasons for this. And so you can see right down here, I'm kind of highlighting that, cause and effect, because that is really like what history is. And in the same way that learning how to do math, right? Like learning how to work out logic and follow steps and equations, reading and listening and taking in knowledge the way we do right now should be the same way. We need to like come at it, process it in a certain way, like consistently, so that we begin to understand everything through the same lens. Not you and me through the same lens, like all of our understandings are one lens. We don't have like one for over here and one for over here and one for over here. And so as we do that, we can see that 1, 2, 3 equals, okay. So when we do that, then we can begin to be a little bit more shrewd, a little bit more aware of where we're at in our current moment. And we can see things about ourselves and our past, and like our past, right? Like humanity, right? So this is another kind of talking about DNA, talking about there's not like American history as if we're just one person or one type of person. It's like, well, America is the global project. Like we are the home field for globalization, right here, this country is. And so talking about our history is one, it opens our eyes to all kinds of things, and helps alleviate us of the kind of prejudices or the just biases that we can use to interpret things, because it's the first lens that we look at something through. When we kind of look broadly, when we travel with our eyes around the world, which we can do, digitally now, we are enlightened to our own past, and we can see things that we never could before. You can read the rest of this for yourself. It's just kind of a little bit of a lead up about that. There's a few other themes that we'll be looking at. One is communism, and it's ironic because 9 years ago when I started teaching, nobody cared ever when I talked about communism or capitalism or social. No, nobody cared. I mean, no, just really nobody cared. It was like trying to like get people to understand this and pay attention and get excited about it. Not like excited to do socialism or whatever. Like just, hey, this is a big deal. These ideas are going to shape the world for 150 years. And I thought that was more or less kind of done. But look, here we are in the midst of another Red Scare, and there's hardly a communist country left on Earth. China is not a Marxist communist country anymore. Maybe North Korea is, and that's that should say something. I mean, I think they're a very perverted and twisted version of whatever Marx was writing about, but that's usually how most things work with like ideas to real life, right? We don't usually get to produce them in our finest production, right? We don't usually get to put all the right pieces together at the right time. Things are a little sloppier than that when they work out, and so we'll look at communism, capitalism, just economics, but I hope we'll get to see why that's actually not a snoozer. And since 2015, when Bernie Sanders was started in the running against Hillary Clinton, and then really after a few years of Trump, and it's like, oh man, communism is back as this like red herring, and everybody's like, oh, you want police to stop shooting 12-year-old boys in the back? You must want like a dictatorship where we send people to concentration camps, right? Like, because somebody told me all those things go together. Well, we're going to leave all of the somebody told me these things go together right here, because everything goes together. And when you start getting cognitive dissonance and you cannot put one thing from over here together with this over here and understand like how the world would work, you're like, well, I'm a flat earther, damn it. So I just believe it's flat, I don't know, we're spinning on the back of a giant sea tortoise, or we're suspended in space. It's a glass dome. The moon landing's fake. It's just a big giant conspiracy. Okay, all right. But you believe in cell phones, right? Mm-hmm. How do they work? What? Well, you got to explain that. If you're going to say like, hey, the way all of the physicists and all of the scientists in the whole world and pretty much the vast majority of all humans believe about the world. Okay, explain more about it to me. You figured that out. That's a pretty big one to figure out. So it's like, well, you're challenging my belief system. No, I'm challenging an intellectual position that you're holding that might not be super well founded, which that's not a mean thing to do, right? Like I don't want anybody to believe the earth is flat. Last year, or at the beginning of this year or last year, a man right in Barstow over here blew himself to kingdom come on a rocket he made, flying for the Flat Earth Society to try to get up high enough to take a picture. Okay? Like, those thoughts are dangerous. Clearly, the thoughts governing all of us and the world we live in today they're not all sane ones. They're not all rational ones. So when we hear false information, we should be happy and kind to talk that through with somebody. When we are going, oh, and understanding that something we believed is false, we should take a minute, stop, pause, and realize that, like, that is okay. That's why you're at school. That's why we study history. That's why people read, because we don't have everything figured out ever. And this is very clear when we study history, especially in the era of global, learning, global networked, one-brained kind of global consciousness learning, which is why we're using, open source material and things that can be, checked by the public, because I trust the public more than, somebody that has a financial benefit to get from sponsoring something. So yeah, Wikipedia is okay for us. Here, I'm going to move my screen in a little bit. There we go. Okay, so here's just a little bit of a ramp up for some thoughts that I want you to kind of sit out while we're trying to go back and enter a really long time ago. I mean, 150 years ago it's very short in terms of the cosmos, right? But in terms of culture, in terms of like the human experience, it is several eons ago. Like, humanity has gone through such utterly rapid changes in that 150 years that it's not like, oh, we hit this modern era and this postmodern era. And it's like, no, there were like all these specific ages, and that wound up creating these like very tight kind of generations that get very defined and separated from one another by these new technologies. So, one of the rifts we're seeing in our country is not an unusual one. It's a rift between the old and the young, and it's growing by the moment. Currently, in September of 2020, what do we do about that? Well, I think for any of us studying history, we get the double benefit of looking back over our own lives when we get to look at this kind of history of the last, however many years you've been alive, and go, oh, that shines a lot more light on that. And we also get to go back and see, that was hard. I can't even imagine how hard that might have been for people before us, because we need to develop empathy for everybody, including ourselves, right? Like, so, people live through crazy stuff. Oh my God. Okay. No wonder they were so dysfunctional. All right. And that's even crazier. And by the time you get up to like right now, it's like, this is humanity on hyperdrive, and nobody knows where the brake pedal is on anything. And so, have some empathy for yourself. Like, yeah, times are hard. Global pandemic. This stuff's not fun. Like, we need empathy for ourselves. We need empathy for those that are different than us. Both, in the moment right now, culturally, linguistically, but also just different from us historically. So having grace for our parents and our grandparents when we realize, you lived my dad was born at the end, he was born in 1943. So World War II is going on. And for the first 5 or 6 years of his life, they had an outhouse. Like, what? Like, they didn't have electricity. He lived in Arkansas and Kentucky. So it was, I just can't even imagine that. So when I think about how much somebody born then lived up through, my father died earlier this year. That's a lot of life to see change. There are people right now who are alive who fought in World War II, right? Like, they're not going to be around very much longer. There are kind of, our living memory of World War II. That's the thing I like to think through and talk about, because once that's gone, all we have are the artifacts, right? And for something like World War II, we have an immense amount, as the History Channel has proven to us. There has to be more television shows made about Adolf Hitler than any person in the world. I'm positive of it. Like, and it's probably only going to grow because we're fascinated with that time, that war. It was transcendent. It was so real that you couldn't deny it. You had to deal with it. So if you wanted to say, no, that was not real, the Holocaust was fake, you've got billions of people that will disagree with you, for years and years and years and years. And as the living memory disappears, guess what goes on the rise? Through the roof. Yeah, Holocaust denial. So that's an element of revisionist history, and I'll get into that in kind of Unit 2 when we, for 1865 and Reconstruction. But that's another thing we'll be looking at. Like, how do we have to interpret what we're looking at and learning? How do we do that in a way that's not going to be like this kind of revisionism where we're like, well, I just want to cut all the shit out that I don't like. I just, you know what? That's what the Christian schools do. They're like, oh, we're going to get rid of Thomas Jefferson. Well, he had a black slave wife, and he also was like liberal. Like, he wasn't like a liberal conservative like John Adams, right? He was too liberal. Well, just kind of cut him out. That's, the Texas School Board of Education doing that for public schools. They're just, I don't want to talk about the Holocaust. And you go, well, you might not be able to get away with that, right? Like, there are international institutions to check on this, right? The Shoah Foundation. They're like, we're right next to the Museum of Tolerance, the Holocaust Museum in Hollywood. But you can minimize the Holocaust, right? You can glaze over it. I don't, this happened. This was, they were sick bastards, all the Nazis, and look, they all did this, and it was like, what? That's fuck. I can't take that in. And so, just okay, on to the next thing. Like, Elvis is coming up. Let's talk about the 50s. That's a way easier to talk about. So those themes and more, but they have to be informed by context. So here, I'll give you guys just the overview tour of this little funny intro I made. Here's the last sighting of a dodo bird was just before the 1700s hit. And then I laid out just some of these big things that happened, right? And tried to pick ones that would kind of pepper and salt throughout of, technological advances and big, world moments, the French Revolution. So Napoleon, the steam locomotive, Antarctica. So you can just look through these. Like, I'm not going to test you on any of this. I might take like some big things, because there's a lot in here, right? So I'd take some really big things and maybe give you like 5 and go, well, put those in order. Like, sort those quickly. That might come up on a test, but it wouldn't be. I'm not going to ask you about the date, right? Like, so that is. I want everybody to get that. That's the difference in kind of approach to dating with grades in history. Almost everybody's experience in history class is getting tested on dates, and well, in the age of the internet, that's not as helpful as it once was, maybe, for us. We can look up the date for anything at pretty much any moment. But what that doesn't do for us is allow us to internally sort things and catalog them, like, right, oh, that happened over here. I kind of know my way around history. So when we were talking last week about having like big road markers or landmarks where you can navigate to, you can go, okay, well, kind of the big landmarks around towns, and the big intersections, the main streets. So if I gave you any of those and said, hey, meet me here, at this kind of intersection or by this, store or landmark, we could probably meet up, and that wouldn't be too complicated, and we both kind of speaking the same language. But if I said, hey, meet me at this address, and it was like a house or someplace out in, the way out in the sticks, you would need more specific information to do that. So the specific information we can go and like look up when we're there. Like, ooh, that's over here. I want to know more about that. Okay, I can look that up. But if we just are gonna have to rely on looking everything up every time, history will always befuddle us. It'll always like evade us as something that's too overwhelming. So these are just some of the kind of big ones. These are things you guys should be aware of and know about, like when these happen, right? The telegraph. This is what developed what we are on today. Like we don't have that without these moments that real normal people did in their lives that made sense to them at the time. So here's some videos on that. I'm going to play like 10 seconds of each one of them here.
Buying a boat. It's sad. I'm sad. I miss you. Tired of being pillaged. So here's a new map with new countries. Now you can't tell who they're being.
Ooh.
Pretty cool, huh? Some of it's water. Fuck it. Actually, most of it's water. I can't even get from here to there without buying a boat. It's sad. I'm sad. I miss you.
How did this happen?
A long time ago, actually never, and also now, nothing is nowhere. When? Never. Makes sense, right? Like I said, it didn't happen. Nothing was never anywhere. That's why it's been
All right, it picks up and like it starts going at hyper speed through.
Here, Alexander just had the idea of conquering the entire Persian Empire. It's a great idea. He was great. And now he's dead. Hopefully the rest of the gang will be able to share the empire even.
So you get it. It's like a kind of snarky, attitude-y video, but it's great. It's like very creative and funny, and I don't know, it made me think. It made me go, that made me think about some things in some new ways. This is a brilliant TED Talk, so it's like 20 minutes. Again, this one's probably like a 20-minute video on big history, kind of the idea of looking at things in the large, expansive stuff, understanding things on not just a micro level like we're looking at here, 150 years, but remembering to put that in context of like, ecological history or astro history, right? Like the history of our universe. And so here's some videos along those lines, the history of Earth. So like it just takes you through and shows you like what how the Earth began, the best estimation at least, right? Again, you could have a better idea of explaining that, but you got to prove it. And this one I found very helpful, looking at human expansion over 100 or over, all of our existence. This was so at the beginning of this year, I taught 107, the first half of American history, and I hadn't taught it in some years. And let me go to full screen here. There we go. I hadn't taught it in some years, and so I went back and I was kind of digging in and going, I'm going to get to the bottom of just human migration to North America. Because usually when I had heard about it talked about, and granted, like for me in school, that's like 30 years ago, as a kid, as like a little kid. And so their best guess is going, hey, people came over like, 10,000 years ago. Oh, okay. Really? No, it was like 50,000 years ago. It's like people back and forth, right? Because everybody's got these different theories, and they'll find bone fragments, and then they'll interpret it, and then they'll find another one and go, oh, no, that was the wrong one. That doesn't go here. That's with this. And so it's like kind of, it's a ever-moving game, the same way our understanding of dinosaurs is, right? Like, we're like, oh, that's not even a dinosaur anymore. They figured that was totally wrong. Here's the new dinosaurs from that. Like, oh, okay. Because they're always finding stuff. And for humans, we are finding human fossils all over the place, right? Largely where you're seeing the dots now are the oldest ones in the world. Actually, quite a few more in Southeast Asia down there. And on there's a Wikipedia page for these fossil records that you can look at with details of like, oh, this is the date or range of dates that these fossils were found at this site, and they've dated them to this period. And you can just kind of like, you can sort those through looking at, you know, by geographic location, by age, by, you know, date found, even see where people are lining stuff up. So, mainly what I was wanting you guys to get out of this, this page here is that, get perspective on things. This is that video we talked about last week in class. You can watch that again if you want. And then this is a little 500 years of European colonialism in 3.5 minutes. So you can watch that one too. It gives you just a great overview of the world up to, especially this point, right? The world up to 1865, right? The end of the Civil War. So, go through this, look at these things, and just, you know, do it in a way that's like open-minded and just trying to take in the experience of taking in a lot of information like that and just going, all right, I'm just going to kind of take it in and then just reflect on it. And so, like, you know, you might want to, while you're watching them, jot down some thoughts or ideas, because those are the things that could lead to like really great projects or, easy things that you want to look up and maybe add to notes even. So, okay. That is that. So for what this would have been week 1, and we're now starting week 3, just go through this and look at what happened in just such a short period of time. And then look at what happened in such a immense long period of time. Yeah. Okay. Noah out.